Hey everyone, it's Petticoat from Rock Daydream Nation, and welcome back to the show. Happy 2026, the Parish of Rock. How's it going, mate?
Yeah, really good. Really looking forward to this.
We are going to talk about Dokken, a band that had a little bit of heat in the early 80s, early to maybe later part of the 80s, and we're going to talk about the album Tooth and Nail from 1984. So this was their second album. A lot of the songs are part of the Dokken staple. I think we're going to talk songs, we're going to talk performances, we're going to just talk all things Dokken. And one of the big, I think, burning questions is, why was this band not bigger? Why wasn't this album a smash? So during the course of the show, I think everyone will find out our feelings, our views about this album. But I'll throw it over to you. What was your first encounter with this album, Parish?
Well, this was my start with Dokken. From memory, I initially heard a song on the Friday Rock Show from, I think it was Friday Rock Show with Tommy Vance in '84. I suspect it was Tooth and Nail, but I might be wrong. But that's kind of my memory is it was Tooth and Nail. And then about the same time, I saw a review in Kerrang that gave it a pretty positive review. I then saw the album cover, and decided to get the album. I haven't got the album to hand. I've mentioned before on this show that we had a flood a few years ago in the garage, which when the roof came off and damaged about half my record collection. And unfortunately, this was one of the albums that got damaged. And I have not replaced it in the last 4 years since then. Although we'll see at the end of this whether I've actually bought it now, having revisited the album or not, but I won't spoil that yet. So that was my introduction to them. I loved the album then. I played it all the time. And the next two albums I really liked at the time as well. And I've only ever seen them once, which was in, I think, 86. It was either 85 or 86, but I think it was 86. When I saw them at Hammersmith Odeon, and they were a really good live band, but it's the only time I've seen them. So yeah, that was my introduction to Dokken, and obviously back then, most information you got on bands like this in the UK would have been through Kerrang. So that was kind of all the news and all the information I got about them was through Kerrang.
Yeah, I was first introduced to them in around about 1984-85. This album was very widely circulated in the local metal scene, and there are a lot of bands that were covering these songs. I can just recall seeing local metal bands that were covering Just Got Lucky and Into the Fire. So it definitely was making waves in the metal scene, but mainstream, not a peep.
It did nothing in the UK. I mean, it hardly sold anything, I think.
Absolutely. And reading up about it, this band seemed to be a bit of a perennial support band. I fell in love with this album when I heard it. I think the thing that really got me is the melodies. The melodies, the song arrangements, it's all very hooky. And George Lynch's guitar playing, it cuts out of the speaker. You know, you could tell that this guy was a real guitar hero. You know, also perfectly synchronized with Don Dokken, and he's a very unusual tone, voice, very melodic. Yeah, look, I think I was pretty well hooked when I heard this album the first time. And I recently did a show on this channel with Melissa Nee, and we were talking about 1984. And I ranked this as one of the top albums of 1984, which was a really stellar year for hard rock and heavy metal. So why don't we talk about the tracks? And this will be a way of just, revisiting and reacquainting with the album. The first song is Without Warning, which is an instrumental. So it's got a bit of an acoustic build-up, and then it rolls into this really tasty George Lynch type of guitar lick, and you can tell straight away that this beautiful sharp tone that they're something really special, and then it just segues into Tooth and Nail, which we'll talk about. But Without Warning, it's got a sort of an ominous feel about it, but it's a really good introduction, to the band. And I like albums where they have a little bit of introduction, whether it's Whitesnake with John Lord and the keyboards introducing a song. Metallica have done it. Other bands have done it where they do these little sort of acoustic introductions and then it goes pow into something heavy. Do you like this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, sometimes you hear these introductions and you think it's kind of a continuation of the song that follows, and why didn't they just make it one song? But I think in this case, this does stand alone. I love the blend of the guitar and the keyboards. I think they mix really well. It's very atmospheric. It builds brilliantly. And bearing in mind, this was the first time I'd really heard George Lynch when I put this album on. I just think it's a great introduction to his guitar playing. Before I go too far, I'm going to say I think all four of them are killer on this album. I mean, Don Dokken's vocals are great. George Lynch is as you say, a guitar hero. Jeff Pilson on bass and vocals is really good, and Mick Brown's drumming is excellent as well. So you've got four powerhouses, I think, in the band, which all contribute in different ways through the record. And I don't always like Tom Werman's production, but I think his production on this is really good, and it certainly stood the test of time in my view. It doesn't feel dated in any way, and I think he's brought out what I like best about Dokken on this, and I think he's brought it out. It's interesting that you said what hooked you in was the sort of melodic rock side. What hooked me in was the heavy metal side. I mean, it kind of alternates a bit between, but I think there's aspects of this album that could have been straight out of the new wave of British heavy metal. The guitar, the sound, the vocals, and in 1984, whilst I liked AOR, I liked, albums like Foreigner for an example. I didn't mind, bands like REO Speedwagon. I liked them when they ramped up the guitars a bit. That's when I liked them. And so there are songs on this that are a bit AOR-y. But to me, it's the heavy metalness of this album that really appealed to the 1984 Parish of Rock. And I therefore think it kicks off brilliantly Without Warning, because it has that kind of atmospheric. You could almost hear that on a Dio album as an intro, as an example, in my view. And I just think it sets up the album really well.
Yeah, I probably think it's got a little bit more melodic chops than a new wave of British heavy metal, because I find a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal bands are very riffy, and it's like repeating riffs and a little bit more sledgehammer. A little bit more music.
I get
bit more musically narrow. Yeah. I do get it. It does touch into it. And
I'm thinking of bands a bit like Praying Mantis, who are a bit more melodic, or even Def Leppard on around this era, which were more melodic. But we'll come on to it. But there are a couple of songs that I think could be definitely played by some of those heavier new wave. But we'll come on to that as we go through the album.
Yeah. Well, Tooth and Nail, what a killer track. The song title is basically how they fought to keep their record contract, because the previous album flopped and they were going to be dropped. So I think there's a lot of pain. A lot of labouring in regards to recording this album, get on side with the record label, get it out. Tooth and Nail is a really fine title to sort of encapsulates what this band was going through. This has the rock crunch for you. This has the heavy metal.
It does, yeah, exactly.
The spotlight on George Lynch. Those runs that he does this run, and the focus is just on the guitar, and it's sort of like his Eddie Van Halen Eruption moment, only for another maybe for 5 seconds, and he's doing this wonderful little run. I love this song. I think it's a killer opening track. What do you think?
Well, this proves the point I was making about they could almost be a new wave of British heavy metal band. From my view, I think this almost sounds like early Maiden in its riff. His vocals, I think, sound He doesn't sound like this on most of the album, but on this song, he sounds almost like Paul Di'Anno in his gruffness of his vocals to me. And when I first heard it, I thought I had to go and look to see who was singing, because I thought perhaps it was Paul Di'Anno on this song. Clearly, when we get into the album, you can tell it's not. But on this particular song, I love the double kick drums on it. And then at the end, when he screams straight to the top, that could be Rob Halford, the way he does that it goes high and screams. So this, to me, this is a heavy metal song, but it is for what would have been in 1984 with a modern twist, because he's doing, as you say, he's doing that guitar, what people nowadays call shredding. I never knew that term until recent years, but he's doing that kind of guitar shredding on this, which is very Eddie Van Halen, and it just fits perfectly. So for me, this is the heavy aspect of Dokken, and fits with the album cover. I mean, I think that album cover, whilst it's a bit simplistic, for a heavy metal band, it's perfect. I'm not sure it was perfect for a melodic rock band though, and I do put down as my first reason for why maybe the album didn't do so well was because of the cover. I wonder if the cover might have put off some
100%.
of the more commercial rock fans. It would have appealed to people like me in '84, who wanted my rock to be heavy, but I think it may have put off a lot of the sort of more commercial melodic rock fans, which they obviously corrected on the next album. But I think it may have put a few people off.
Yeah, I think it's Daffy, the album cover, and you've got this claw, and I've sort of associated it because they had some association with A Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger, and, I think it's a bit of a short-sighted maybe marketing tie-in. If it's got nothing to do with A Nightmare on Elm Street, I think the imagery is just Daffy, and I would have really preferred that if they kept their fashion neutral and their image a little bit more neutral, the songs are so good, they would have transgressed this. I think they just went a little bit too far, and we'll talk about that more as we go through the album. But yeah, look, Tooth and Nail, to me, announces a guitar hero with George Lynch. Some people say he overplays, but I just think that on this album, everything he does is just perfect within the confines of the song. And I don't think he's like a Vinnie Vincent where it's basically the song servicing he's playing. I think he's got these little snippets. He goes in and he comes out again. And I don't think I think what sets him apart was he was so different. The tone and his approach to melody and his approach to doing these runs was kind of unique, that you didn't hear it. There's a lot of cookie cutter guitarists in the early 80s, and they did the same chord changes, and you'd hear a song, because you and I were probably the same. We used to buy records, and you hear it, and you could probably you could work out how the song was going to end. With this cat, you didn't know which way he was going.
No.
And there's only a few guitarists in this era that I put him on maybe 4 or 5. Warren DeMartini, I rate pretty highly. Jakey Lee, Vivian Campbell, and this guy. I think,
and obviously C.C. DeVille as well.
But I think these guys that put them ahead of the pack is they did something different. You just didn't know which way they were going. So
well, its influences came through, didn't they? So there was clearly an aspect to that Eddie Van Halen sound, but he also had that commercial rock, which to me sounded quite Mick Jones from Foreigner, with the melodies coming through. But you could also hear somebody like a Ritchie Blackmore coming through with a more traditional rock sound as well. So he was kind of blending, I think, 3 different types of influences in, whereas a lot of guitarists at this stage were just trying to copy Eddie Van Halen, I think, or be similar to that style, and it lost any uniqueness. Whereas I think his different, and we'll come through the songs again. We'll pick up on a few of these comments, but he definitely was pulling upon varied influences, I think, when he was playing.
another thing, he was a good rhythm player because you hear a lot of the songs, they're not just shredding, you can hear his rhythm playing.
Yeah, you can hear the rhythm. Yeah,
Underpins the song. So,
yeah.
next song, it's probably my favourite, Just Got Lucky. There's just the turn and melody, the key change. It's like on a turn of a dime. Just makes this song so bittersweet. You know, you were just using someone, and I was the one. You just got lucky. It's devastating. I'll throw it over to you, and then I'll put my reply. But there's something about this song I just find really, really great.
I think it's a great. I think it's a great commercial rock song. You can see why it was released as a single in '84, and you can see why it was a bit of a hit. I think it got in the top 20 in America, something around that sort of level.
I'll look it up, Bessie. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I'll look it up.
I thought they had some modest hits off this album. Not the album itself, but the singles. But I might be wrong. Yeah, it's very commercial. It's got great hook. I think the vocals are really good, and I think the drum sound on it is really good as well. It's got a great drum sound. But I think this is where the problem lies a bit on their success, because I personally think they blend the heaviness of Tooth and Nail with the commercialness of Just Got Lucky really well. But I wondered whether to the casual listener it was too much of a shift change. The heavy rockers maybe thought Just Got Lucky was a bit too soft, and maybe the people who liked Just Got Lucky thought something like Tooth and Nail was too heavy. And maybe by straddling those two sort of areas of rock in '84, bearing in mind this was very early days of hair metal. Hair metal hadn't really kicked in at this point. I just wonder whether they kind of straddled and split the audience as a result of that. That if they'd focused more on one or the other, maybe they would have had a better mass appeal. Having said all of that, I love them for that because I like both of those styles of music. So I think it's great. But I do wonder that's part of the reason why they weren't bigger.
Yeah, it got to number 27, but
oh well, there you go. Yeah,
should have been top 5.
And it should have been top 5. Yeah, I had a feeling it was a minor hit. I just couldn't remember exactly where.
It is. Yeah. It's just such a great song. I just think the melody lines on that are just so hooky. And another thing, when I was listening to this, I think this song could actually be slowed down. I know you don't like ballads. Parish of Rock, the ballad man, not for him.
Well, you're gonna get you might be in for a surprise a bit later.
Yeah, but I could imagine this being played like a ballad. I could imagine this being played unplugged. The melody and the arrangement of this song is so strong. You could do it in different sort of tempos. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's definitely a song that doesn't have to be a rock song. It would transcend into just certainly for 1984 would have transcended. Yeah. Transition. You could somebody like a Rick Springfield, for instance. You could see doing a cover version of it, or somebody like that. It could become a pop song, I think, quite easily.
Yeah, and it's a song that Bon Jovi would kill for.
Those couple of albums. I'm sure in those early albums, they were definitely listening to Dokken.
Absolutely, because you can see
a lot of similarities.
Well, I reckon they were definitely listening to Dokken because they refined the template, and Heartless Heart. It's got a bit of bite to this one. This is Brown, Lynch, and Pilson. What do you think of this song?
I think this is almost the blueprint for what became later hair metal. It's got the melodies of Just Got Lucky, but it's got the kind of guitar crunch, as you said, of Tooth and Nail. It kind of blends the two together really well. And it has gang vocals, which was obviously a big part of hair metal later. So yeah, I think this blends Tooth and Nail and Just Got Lucky together very well and shows how they've got a sound. They haven't really got two sounds, as I suggested earlier. I just think those two tracks maybe are the two sides of their sound, but this one is the one where it comes together and you hear really what Dokken's all about.
Yeah, Heartless Heart. Interesting play of words.
Yeah,
But this is, the gang vocals, raise your fists in the air, but at the same time, it's got tasty melodies, and you've got the guitar work of Lynch. Don't close your eyes. So Don Dokken, Lynch. What do you think of this one?
Back to the heaviness of Tooth and Nail. I think certainly in the guitars and the music. I think there's the opening guitars is really good. There's a heavy riff all the way through. I love the double kick drums, and the fact the drums are played mainly on the toms. I think that comes across well. If the vocals are very polished, and if I was being nitpicking, and it is nitpicking, I think the vocal style he had on Tooth and Nail would have fitted in on this song. And I think maybe the vocals are slightly too polished, but as I say, being a bit nitpicking. But the thing that really elevates this from a very good song to a great song for me is the solo. I just think the solo is fantastic. And I think that makes this one of the standout tracks. So, yeah, good, really good.
I'll stick my neck out. I think it's his best playing is on this album. I think he was at his stone cold peak. There's some other albums where he's right up there, but I really think that I think it's his best work on Committed to Tape on this album. Okay, we flip over to side 2, When Heaven Comes Down. This is a bit of a slow, or a little bit doomy, a bit sludgy. Now I can hear a new wave of heavy metal.
Yeah,
it's sort of like maybe Glam Sabbath.
yeah. Well, I wrote Doom down as well in my notes, but I put it down as it had the pace of it, and the riff reminds me a bit of Priest. So Priest or Sabbath, but that kind of sound. And certainly through the through the verse, and then it has a more of what would have been a traditional hair metal sort of chorus on the song with a bit of gang vocals. It reminds me now, looking back, I'm not saying I thought it at the time, but it kind of reminds me of Kiss Creatures of the Night era, which would have been maybe a year or so earlier, but it's got that kind of sound of mixing a heaviness with a bit of a glamness to it. So I'm not saying at all that they've copied Kiss or anything. It's just looking back, it kind of has a similar sound to things like War Machine on Creatures of the Night. So
yes, I agree with that. I can hear that, but just the Don Dokken vocal, When Heaven Comes Down. It's really doomy, and Dokken had been around. He was a bit older. And the 80s was an interesting era, Parish, where you had a lot of rock stars in the metal world that were a little bit older than, pop stars, that you'd made.
Yeah.
I think Dokken was in his early 30s, and success, came a little bit later.
Paid their dues in a rock and roll band, as somebody once said.
Yeah, so initially they had been rejected by the record company. There were a lot of swings and roundabouts. Is that a factor of why they weren't so big? Because they were a bit older, and marketing is. I think it's the marketing side. I think it's the visual side that was the big letdown, and also the interpersonal side of the band. I think musically, thumbs up, but I think on the negative side, it was the image, the marketing, the personal side, because it's public knowledge Dokken and Lynch didn't get on. It was very fractious in regards to the recording sessions, and a lot of the interviews and press. I knew more about Dokken than I knew about the music in reading it in Kerrang and reading it in Hit Parader about the sniping. I think it had that bit of a Kevin DeBrow feel about it. When Kevin DeBrow became big and famous and he started shooting off and nitpicking people and, quite right. The stocks went down. I think Dokken, there was a lot of press that they did. They kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right, because if you're a fan of the band, you want them to be a band of brothers, don't you? You don't want to hear that they don't get on and they're constantly arguing. And you might occasionally accept a Richie Blackmore who just is known to have an odd personality. But generally, you want your bands to be looking as if they're friends and they're having fun and they're all in it together. You don't want to see that. And I think you're right about the image as well. I mean, bearing in mind this was the era of MTV, and maybe their image didn't quite fit like Motley Crue maybe had the image. Because about this time, I think, am I right in saying this would have been about the time of Shout at the Devil? It was around this time, wasn't it? 83 or 84, I can't remember. So, but they had the look, and maybe that gave them the advantage.
Yeah, well, why don't we watch a little bit of a clip that I've just got ready? This is just
go on.
Was very particular of their of the 80s, isn't it?
It looks like Quite Right, doesn't it?
Should have known better, should have seen right through. Over and over, falling in love.
This looks like a direct rip-off of Stone Cold, where the use of the mirrors. Remember Jolene Turner and Rainbow?
Yeah. Looks a bit like Loverboy as well.
Yes.
They used to look a bit like that in their videos.
I reckon if they stripped it down and they had street clothes and they were a little bit like stuck to the denim, the band would have lasted.
Yeah.
Their look was just, I don't know, it was very much of a particular time period that just didn't last.
That wouldn't have appealed to me. If I'd seen that video, that would have put me off buying the album.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't recall seeing any Dokken videos in the day.
Sorry, say that again?
I don't recall seeing any Dokken videos in the day.
No, I don't particularly, but I can imagine that wasn't played a lot because it looks so generic and
yeah,
as I say, just you say it looks like Rainbow, it looks like Loverboy, it looks like everybody at the time. There's nothing there that was, and those stripy trousers was straight out of Quite Right, wasn't it? That red and black.
Yeah. But a lot of people say, I mean, if you were in a band in the 80s and that was the fashion, you just follow the fashion. Yeah. But I really think that the marketing and the fashion and their press really let them down heavily. And it's all a package, isn't it?
Sorry, I was going to say that video looks nothing like the image that the album cover gives you.
No, it doesn't. So, Into the Fire. I love this song. I think this is probably maybe my second favourite song on the album. This is one that got played a lot. It's in their song set to this very day. What do you think of this one?
Well, firstly, this was a single as well, and I think this was a minor hit. I might be wrong, but I think this was the first single, and I think it again scraped the top 30 or the top 20 in America. It's quite an interesting song because it starts a bit like AC/DC with the cymbals and the guitar, and you think it's going to be quite a rocking song, and then it goes into an acoustic, slows down into an acoustic bit, which is really good, and then it kind of moves into being almost like a pop rock song, and then the tempo increases again, and it's a bit faster, and then it slows down again to that acoustic poppy bit, and I think it plays really well. I think quite often songs like that don't work, but this one does. I love the changes in the pace and the style on it, and I think it's really catchy. So I agree. I think it's a really good song. I'm not surprised they pick it as a single because it is so catchy. So yeah, really good, but quite interesting because I think it's a bit different to the rest of their stuff.
But this is a band. This is not your just run-of-the-mill LA band. They've got great arrangements. You know, they throw different things in. There's key changes. There's rhythm changes. That's what makes this band so damn interesting, and it's a real mystery why they weren't bigger. Because I think they weren't bigger because it's the other side of it. You know, the music's fine.
I still think though songs like that would have put off the people who would have liked Tooth and Nail and Don't Close Your Eyes. Those heavy songs. I think I don't know. I mean, a few bands pull it off, don't they? Doing both sort of heavy, being really heavy and melodic. But I think some bands struggle. But yeah, it's the whole package is not quite working for them, is it? Whether it's the look, whether it's the videos, whether it's the album cover. Yeah, they're kind of. I think they're confused on what they want to be, or if they're not confused, the marketing is confused over what they want Dokken to be.
Well, they're on Elektra, and Elektra did good stuff on their metal roster. I mean, look at Motley Crue.
Yeah,
maybe they were using the template of Motley Crue and thinking they could apply it to Dokken, because that film clip to me is like a Motley Crue film clip. You know?
Yeah, but Motley Crue had a defined look, didn't they? I mean, particularly at this time, you look at that first album, they've gone all out glam, which was a bit different to anybody else at that time. And then when they went to, they moved on to Shout at the Devil, they brought in the sort of heavy metal look, you know, with the pentagram, which then got banned. But they kept with the look of the first album, but made it look more heavy. And as I say, sort of more satanic. And then when they moved on to the next album, which I didn't like so much, they then started moving into the more sort of what would you call it? Sort of, it was a glam look, but it was moving towards less makeup and looking a little bit more street cred. So they had an involving look that was consistent, and they all fitted it. You look at that. There was one guy there with his hair looked like he could have stepped out of Duran Duran with his hairstyle, and then there's somebody else who's looking pretty heavy metal, and then there's, you know, which I think was the drummer, and then the other two, including Don Dokken, are looking like they've come out of Loverboy. I don't think there was a consistent look. I think they were confused in how they were trying to pitch themselves. Whereas, whether you like Motley Crue or not, they were really clever on how they had a set look per album, and I think that, you know, because of that, it evolved, but it was consistent, and they all had a consistent look.
Well, it just goes to show, in the 80s, image was everything, because I would stack up a lot of these Dokken songs to be, you know, against a lot of the Motley catalogue. I think there were better musicians than Dokken, better songwriting, catchier songs, but it's just the whole image side was just a bit of a mess. And as I said earlier in the show, I think they didn't do good press. Reading interviews with Don Dokken, it was a lot of this stuff that should have been kept under a lid was out in the public space. It was a little bit soap opera. So that can't be good. I think you know, if they had tighter marketing and better PR, they would have been a much bigger force.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the music. So I think that's a killer song. Bullets to Spare. This is a little bit, you know, this has got a bit of a groove to it, doesn't it?
This is my favourite song on the album. I think it. Yeah, I love it. I think it's really good. You're right. It's got a bit of a groove. You mentioned Matt Lang a minute ago, and this kind of reminds me a bit of Pyromania, Def Leppard, and I like Pyromania is one of my favourite albums, so that's probably one of the reasons I like the song. Yeah, but still heavy. It's still got that heavy riff, heavy guitar to it. But yeah, stands out slightly different, I think, from the rest of the album. But yeah, my favourite song, I think.
Big ballad, Alone Again.
Yeah, well, this is when I'm going to surprise you. I like this. So it is a power ballad, I guess, but it's certainly not cheesy in any way. I love the acoustic guitar in it. But the reason I think I like this, and this is why when I do like ballads, is Don's voice sounds really emotional. He sounds like he really means it. the problem with lots of power ballads, it just sounds fake to me, and therefore I don't believe in it. But this, I think I do believe in it. His voice is so emotional, and then the solo, it's just brilliant. It's just got such a killer solo. It's great, and I think the other thing that probably does it some good is it's the only ballad on the album, so I don't feel like it's overdone. When bands maybe alternate between hard rock songs, then a ballad, then a hard rock song, or have 3 or 4 hard rock ballads on an album, whatever. I think it's overkill and it loses me. But as there's only one, and it's one that's done so well, I love this. I think it's really good. And again, I'm not surprised it was a single. And again, I think it was a minor hit, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, when he does that lyric, alone again, without you, it's sort of like his voice trails off, and it does have that emotion. It's got a bit of bite, this ballad. It's got a bit of edge. It's not a syrupy, cheesy ballad, because a lot of those power ballads they're on the wrong side of the ledger. So I think it's the edge. And that's what I like about this album. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. On the surface, it seems very shiny and polished, but I think the arrangements, and especially the guitar playing, there's bite to it. There's a little bit edge. There's a lot.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of going on beneath the surface, and that's why I think this album has kind of a timeless quality, because there's a lot of hair metal and a lot of glam metal. You listen to it, and it's dated. Now, I'm not going to defend everything about this album. There are certain production choices that sound like 1984, but I just think that the arrangements of these songs are so strong, and they're all wrapped around the hook being the most important thing. Yeah, that gives it a certain timeless quality. And Alone Again, should have been another hit. So it's one of the 3 strongest songs. So
I think you're right. I mean, it sounds like it was recorded in '84, but it doesn't sound dated, because it hasn't got all the kind of tropes that a lot of albums had from '84. So that's why I think the production stands up pretty well. Because it I don't think you'd have to do a lot to it to remix it for sort of modern production.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we finish off with a rocker, Turn on the Action. So to me, it's like a bookend to Tooth and Nail. I know you said there was another song that sounded like Tooth and Nail. To me, this is like a bookend. Starts off with a ballsy rocker, finishes off with a ballsy rocker. Yeah, it's a little cliche, Turn on the Action. But I think I read a critic who said that even if Don Dokken's singing cliches, he has so much conviction in the way he delivers it. You believe it, and you let him get away with it. So that's what I do. I think we'll let him get away with it, because how many bands sang songs like "Turn on the Action"? It's sort of like get in the open hood Corvette, go down Sunset Strip, and turn on the action. You could hear these sort of songs on an Autograph album.
Yes, you could, yeah. and a few others as well, a few other people's albums as well. I think it's a really good way to finish the album. As you say, a great up-tempo rocker. Kind of reminiscent of Van Halen at their heaviest, certainly with regards to the guitars and the drums. I wrote down "kicks ass" when and I mean that. I wrote that specifically because whereas I think Tooth and Nail has almost a UK heaviness to it, this one definitely has a US heaviness to it. And yeah, best played at 11, isn't it? Turn it right up and blow your ears out with it. It's a great song to finish the album with, and certainly I remember at the time being really excited by this album and this band and wanting to hear more. But because of and the way you finish an album is the way you want to turn it over. If it's a really good last song, you want to turn it over, don't you? And listen to it again, and that's certainly what Turn on the Action does. So good album closer.
100%. Another element to this, I think, Don, even being in Australia, there was a perception that they were kind of a B-level band because they always seem to be supporting other artists. I think, maybe in retrospect, they should have just toured. Look, I understand the concept of being a support act, playing arenas, and putting it to the biggest audience. But let's face it, if you're a support act, most of the people are getting their bourbon and cokes, they're in the merch stand, they're in the car park, and waiting for the main act to come on. So even though you might get some people listening and watching your show, you're not going to get that 100%. I think it would have been a better strategy for this band that they just did a headlining tour and play smaller venues and work your way up.
Yeah.
Because these songs are so strong. And, there's going to be some folks from America and they're going to correct me. All right, I like to stand corrected that they did this, or maybe, maybe I'm factually incorrect, but my perception is this band were the support band. They're like a Y&T. Y&T is another band I kind of put on a Dokken level. Great song.
I agree.
But just didn't break through. They were at that B level because they were perennially the support band. I think what they should have done is just go out there and do the mid-size halls and build up your audience because, Do you think that could have been a factor?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think so. I mean, I don't know, a bit like you. I mean, it's possible that earlier in the career they'd done the clubs and tried the smaller venues. I suspect it was the record label getting them on to the bigger tours, thinking it will push them and do them better. But I think they are the kind of band that would start in the clubs, move up to theatres, move from theatres to the arenas. And I think it would have worked as well, because in '84... their music was only kind of starting out. I don't think it was quite as mainstream as it became in '86 or '87. And I think maybe one of their problems was they kind of peaked a bit too early for where the market was. So therefore, by touring smaller clubs, they would have been building as the fan base built, rather than being seen as... By '87, they would have been seen as yesterday men. Coming out in '84, if you're a kid in '87 getting into hair metal, you were looking at the new bands that were coming through then, not looking at the bands that had been around. So unless you'd already established yourself like a Motley Crue had, or you had somebody like a John Bon Jovi who, let's be honest, they did it based on the looks more than anything, more than the music. But I think for a lot of bands... you get a new wave coming through of bands like Cinderella and Poison because they're fresh and the kids are ready for it then. Whereas I think '84, they were just a bit too early for that. So playing the clubs, getting better, building their own audience probably would have worked, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it would. A question to you. How much did you take notice of support bands?
Sometimes quite a lot. But it depends what I knew of them. I mean, occasionally they blew me away. So I'll give you some examples. My very first gig was AC/DC Highway to Hell, and they had Def Leppard open, and that blew me away.
That's a great pairing.
The first time I ever saw Cold Chisel was a support to Slade, and I hadn't even heard of them before.
And yet they blew me away. What a strange...
Yeah, but two of the best rock vocalists ever, I would say, in Jimmy Barnes and Noddy Holder. I saw the Angels, or Angel City as they were, support Cheap Trick. Never heard of them before, but they blew me away. So bands like that, absolutely. But equally, I saw Bon Jovi open for Kiss in '85, and they barely made I barely remembered them when they started to become big. I knew I'd seen them, but I didn't really remember them. Who else did I see that later became famous that I didn't? Even U2. I saw U2 support Slade, another strange pairing. A couple of years before they broke big. Barely remember them. So it's a bit mixed. Sometimes it works. But in the case of the ones I've mentioned, I think in the case of Cold Chisel and... the Angels, they were established headliners in their own right and therefore knew how to play an audience. I think in the case of Def Leppard, there was enough noise about them off the back of sounds that everybody was just interested to see what this. I think we all went expecting this bunch of kids to be crap, and then all of a sudden you thought actually they're really good. So I think maybe there was, in the examples I gave, there were some differences. But yeah, I saw a lot of bands before they became famous as a support act, and they didn't make a dent at all. I mean, I saw another example. I saw Maroon 5 support Matchbox 20. And I didn't even make the connection it was the same band when they became famous. It was only my son that said, "Oh, we saw them, didn't we?" And I said, No, we've never seen them. And he said, "Yeah, support Matchbox 20. And I didn't even remember. I didn't make a connection at all. So, yeah, quite often being the support act early days of you it doesn't necessarily pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing that I need to raise is there's a lot of scuttlebutt in various interviews with whether it's Jeff Pilson, whether it's with George Lynch, or with Don Dokken himself about who wrote what on this album, who contributed. There's a lot of sniping, a lot of finger pointing, and I just don't think it does anybody any good, because this is a great piece of rock, and I think it's one of the best LA hard rock American. I think it's one of the best American hard rock albums of the 80s. The legacy is there, but
I'd agree.
all this sniping and scuttlebutt. Look, I've tried to interview Don Dokken, send him multiple emails. Don, if you're listening, the invitation's there. Come on, set the record straight. Love to talk to you. I'm a fan. So's this lad here, and come on, and on Rock Daydream Nation, open invitation. Because I'd love to know the story about Tooth and Nail, but all we read is what's in the press, and a lot of it's negative. And this album should be celebrated, shouldn't it, Parish?
Well, it should be, and I think you with hindsight, bands like Van Halen got it right, didn't they? When they just said we're just going to credit all songs for all four of us because we all contribute, and some write more than others, but we're all going to contribute, and we're all going to kind of get an equal.
And
keep the lid. And just keeps the lid on it, yeah. Breaks up so many bands.
It is. Especially when, you're in your peak, your songs are charting, just keep a lid on it. I mean, it's easier to said than done, like, us critics in the peanut seats to say this sort of thing. But, Van Halen, in the day, you believe that they all liked each other. They got on.
Yeah, I even believe they all wrote the. I also believe they all wrote the songs, but clearly that probably wasn't the case. There was a Dave Lee Roth song in there. There would have been an Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah,
there would have been an Alex Van Halen kind. So I'm sure they all played a part to some extent. But then ultimately the song's also about the arrangement, isn't it? And I guess that's where they say they have equal status on it. I don't know. But it certainly takes the sting out of this, doesn't it, by doing it that way?
Absolutely. But, well, there you have it, folks. I think we're both fans. We're both uber fans of this album. It should have been a mainstream...
should have been a big hit.
Yeah, it should have been a big hit. And it was, as I said, it was probably the template for bands like Bon Jovi, Cinderella, other bands that came much later. Maybe it was the wrong time.
I think maybe a bit early, but then other bands around this time that were similar, I guess, or similar, that early hair metal, you would have had Motley Crue, who did go on to good things, but you had Twisted Sister that kind of fizzled out into the mid to late 80s. You had Quiet Riot kind of fizzled out. So not many bands who are, the other band this album reminds me quite a lot of is Canadians, Coney Hatch. They had a similar sound, I think. And none of those bands made the you could argue they were all kind of proto hair metal or first, the very early days of hair metal, but very few of them actually broke big in the latter part of the 80s. I think, as I say, Motley Crue, but there wasn't many. So maybe they were just a bit too early for the sound. And for the marketplace.
Yeah, well, I can relate it. I think this is like I would sort of relate Dokken to Tooth and Nail it's like Foreigner 4 with a bit of new wave British heavy metal.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
And you've got a kind of a Guitar Hero, which has a little bit of shred
Yeah.
in it. That's
Yeah.
what it is to
I
me.
agree.
It's like Foreigner with those beautiful, melodic, tasty arranged songs mixed with the new wave of British heavy metal.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I've liked revisiting this so much that I've since bought the album to replace the one that got damaged. It hasn't turned up yet, but I have bought it because I enjoyed listening to it again so much. So,
And
really
Dokken,
good.
pull out your, please. Dokken, pull out your finger. I'm talking about the band, not Don Dokken,
Yeah.
but I'm the record company. Pull out your finger. There must be some songs in the vaults. There are a lot of bands that are nicely curated, that they have demos and live tracks and things like that. All of these albums need, remastering. I would love the full bells and whistles package to come out for some of these Dokken albums. Parish, it's always wonderful to have you on the show.
Yeah, brilliant.
We're plotting some more stuff. So, as I said, we love focusing on albums that people tend to forget about. So we're going to get the Parish to go into his attic, look for a cassette, and that'll come out in a couple of weeks' time. So, no, it was wonderful talking about Dokken tooth and nail.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
You can see the Parish on the Contrarians. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Check out our show on Def Leppard and Adrenalize. Lots of comments. That went off like a frog in the sock. In fact, look at all the Contrarian. Look at all the shows with Parish on Rock Daydream Nation. It's just a fun chat indeed.
Exactly.
More shows in 2026 and beyond. All the best, Parish, and thank you once again for doing this show.
See you soon. Yeah.
Cheers.
Great.
See ya.
See you soon.